Another week, another day. Another fine episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2. And this time, it seems to be following a theme. We've gone from basically an odd job for Sid to the Bad Batch going on a treasure hunt. With probably a resident new character who is actually proving to be quite fun. And the episode was certainly full of some rather funny moments along the way. It seems to be the fact they seem to be building on the idea of the fact making things canon before the Republic. We're also introducing some fact of some new stuff as well, including arcane technology. Including what might be something to do with something deep in the past. Maybe the fact they might be making the Celestials canon again, or maybe this will be Disney's version of the Celestials. I don't know, but the Walker in there was quite impressive and powerful. But the story goes in a roundabout sort of way. The fact that Treasure Hunt has been, one of new Sid's contacts has been telling stories to the patrons in Sid's, bar, to a couple of the patrons, and they're laughing it up. And of course, I think she's probably told a few stories to Omega. And of course, Omega believes them because Omega doesn't really know much about the galaxy yet. And let's face it, Omega finds out everything exciting, everything's a new adventure for her. Well, that's what happens when you live in a sterile cloning facility for the better part of 10 years or so since the day you were born. And she's thoroughly enjoying herself. And the sheer thing, I think also is to the fact that, and also in the episode, I think that's one of the best moments yet. I mean, she asked Hunter for permission to go on this adventure, if they could go. And then Hunter looks at Echo, and Echo goes, let her go. And Hunter goes, I think the expression on Hunter's face is so defeated. Those two will be the death of me. That scene there I think was brilliant. I mean, I think the only two who even get half the things about parenting are Echo and Hunter. Basically, they seem to be like the two dads of this whole thing, and they go like, The Echo was like parents to Omega, and just the way they seem to go. They know for a fact that Omega's sort of at the age at which you know for a fact you can't help but worry, and at the same time the fact of this is going to put them into an early grave quite quickly. Oh, that was brilliantly done. I think the other good thing about the whole thing, about the whole episode, I think was the fact of, it turns out the fact they go searching for scrap, basically they need a compressor for the shuttle, and a few other bits and pieces, and they find mostly broken stuff, but then they find an ancient artifact with some coordinates on it, and they shine a light through it, and it reveals a map. And then, of course, and that's the reason why they decided to go on the adventure in the first place. I think the best bit of the whole episode, for me, was the fact of Omega actually going on an adventure where he had all the whole gang together. Along with the fact of, I think Hunter and Echo knowing when the fact they've been beaten, and there's Tech and Wrecker going, because, Tech, it's just something to do, and I think Wrecker, he also likes the idea of being on an adventure as well. Meanwhile, poor old Echo and Hunter are like, oh dear. I think it's a waste of time. It's not a mission, but at the same time, it's absolutely fun, and they have an absolute hoot of a time. Because that's the one thing about the last couple of episodes. We've seen a lot of character development for Tech. I mean, he proves the fact that he can actually win a race just by using his brain. And now we've got Hunter and Echo going like, sort of actually sort of a bit like parents go like, though with the fact they've been beaten, we're also wondering about the same time exactly how this is going to be the death of them. One of the interesting things I think is also about the fact this is the first time I think we've ever seen on screen like pre-Republic stuff, and it turns to be a giant walker that leveled an entire planet. And also within the fact of, I think there's also more lesson about treasure. They go off finding a treasure, and it's a very important one at that. But I think it's just nice to see what is effectively a filler episode, but nonetheless it's quite fun. And we've had the overarching plot of season 1 now, sort of like getting mixed adventures. And it's also just nice to take a break from having to do with Rampart or something else. Probably scheming. I think hopefully in the next couple of episodes we get some more stuff about, Empire's early bureaucracy. And how the Empire sort of is still struggling with its transition and the birth of the rebellion. One of the best things I think I found, is the fact of, the ancient artifact is responsible for levelling an entire planet, and at the same time, it seems for a fact the only way to stop it is to put a crystal in, which makes me think the fact that, and the booby traps as well. Most likely means suggest the fact that this thing is dangerous, so the survivors of this planet, or whatever, decided to destroy this device, put the crystal in and switch it off, and then ultimately put some traps down that effectively serve as a guide. So it almost is the fact the treasure's a logic puzzle, but also at the same time, people don't want to go for the treasure, but unfortunately I think fooling around with this treasure was might have what caused it in the first place. So they buried it, and they buried the walker in a mountain, and then left it, and then put some traps down and everything else on a compass. I think the whole idea was the fact someone would find it, and then activate it, or maybe it would just disappear. But it was particularly good, and I think also the fact the power of this thing, and then Hunters is the fact they were glad that no one can use it again, and I probably have to agree with it. If those things leveled an entire planet, then that would be, and the Empire would sorely want to get their hands on a piece of technology like that. But of course now it's completely useless. It was shut down once before, but now it's completely rendered useless. suggesting quite possibly that its own age. Because if the Empire gets that, they'll have another means of just bringing planets into line. You know, the Empire is already planning the Death Star, and they think that's going to keep the systems in line. A giant walker made of unknown ancient technology, who knows exactly how durable it is going to be even worse. I mean, the Empire can just drop those things down and just call them off to make them after making them surrender. It's probably a far more effective tool because the Death Star just blows up a planet. Once the main reason for the failure about the Death Star is the fact there's only one. So it can't be everywhere at once. And it blows up one planet, but that just means more likely people are going to try and come up with the means of an effective defense. And indeed, that would be the ideal thing. The other thing is also, it's just the fact of, whereas this thing's much more visceral. It destroys everything in its path. Which is far more terrifying in the grounds of the fact that it says that, but it could also pretty much stipulate more resistance against the Empire. But there's also the fact that the thing could be destroyed in orbit before it even had a chance to get down to the ground. I think that's one of the biggest failings of the Empire. It's built to fight a conventional war, but I think even against a conventional opponent, the Empire would struggle, given how corrupt it is. But enough about going on the tangent about how the Empire works. This episode was very, very good. I think the other thing is also just the fact that, and then of course, at the end of the episode, V goes on to tell another one of her. Tells Omega another one of her adventure stories, and Omega believes it. And Hunter's about to say something, but he goes, what the hell? It was a fun adventure. And let's face it, Omega still wants Omega to have somewhat of a childhood. So let her have fun adventures. And let her imagination run wild for a bit. That is probably what he wants more than anything else. And it is nice to see, I think, it's the fact that there's someone else in Omega's life as well. I think he's also thinking it's kind of the fact he doesn't have to worry about too much parenting as well. Omega has another role model that's not a clone. You know, he's got Rekka, Tech, who teach her the values of strength and intelligence, and he could always teach her all the moral guidelines he can, but he knows for a fact that Omega's going to need other guidance when it comes to other issues, things that he's not equipped and qualified to deal with, so having an extra pair of hands around is always going to be good, at least for a time. And let's face it, I think she's probably going to become part of the crew anyway. And I think you also think it was a fun adventure. Sure beats running and hiding. It's nice not to be running and hiding and doing just criminal stuff. So there's that too as well. Overall, this is probably one of the better episodes I've seen, and it's definitely... Bad Batch has certainly proven itself to be quite a good show until now. Well, I've been the Universal Challenger. I ask you to please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheerio!